Good morning, and welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. Hello,
Good
everybody.
morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We were having an interesting conversation. We'll get into our main topic today, so I'll just do a quick introduction. Our main topic today is an incredible article, again, from Data Goblin's Kurt Buehler, the fabric expert, and debunking is fabric, well, actually not debunking, but talking through the idea that fabric is a team sport. You need many people who know many different things in order to make fabric run well in your organization. So I definitely have some really good talking points. I feel like I have some strong opinions around this article. So this will be interesting. I'm to see where this goes. Anyways, that being said, let's talk about our intros. So Tommy was informing me just before the podcast here. I missed out on some of my childhood. So who is this? So Tommy brings up this artist this morning, and I don't have a clue who this is.
Their name was They Might Be Giants. Mm-hmm. They were never on the radio, but they just somehow got very popular. There's just two nerds, and you look at them, and they were best friends nerds, and they could also just play music. So some of their hit songs was like "Don't Let's Start," and that's the actual words. "Don't Let's Start." This is the worst part. "I Am Dr. Worm." They were the intro to Malcolm in the Middle. They were also in the Looney Tunes for Kids. They had a lot of songs there. You just didn't know it.
See, I don't know who these guys are. I've probably heard their music before, but it's not ringing a bell. And I'm not like, oh, that's exactly what it is.
The only one of their songs that obviously earwormed into me, which was their Istanbul. And that is one that I was able to crack off right before the podcast, so I won't torture the listeners.
I'm gonna have to go listen to these guys. I feel like I've missed out on this. I didn't watch Malcolm in the Middle, so I don't know about that from there. And so, the only thing I can remember growing up, kid songs that I would remember, it was like Baby Beluga, like that was that Raffi? I think is the name of the artist.
Yeah, I don't think that was They Might Be Giants though.
No, but I'm just saying that's from my childhood. That's like one of the kid songs that I remember growing up with. Yeah, Raffi.
Yeah, they're not a kids band, and I guarantee you, out of our audience too, probably 20% are major fans of them. The other 80% have never heard of them.
So I'm going to ask chat this exactly right now. So chat, if you're there and you're listening, did you ever hear of They Might Be Giants? And did you watch them growing up? Just give me a shout out here. I'm just kind of curious. See if anyone actually pings us back here and say, "Oh yeah, that was great." So maybe this is just a Tommy thing. And maybe a Seth thing. So,
and they're probably all our listeners that are not here live anyway, so we'll never find out.
Shout into the ether.
Yeah, shout at your podcast that you're running around with. So.
Someone's running like they're my favorite.
Tommy's going to build us a podcast playlist, and this will have to be on some of the playlist.
Yeah. When we actually run our own conference, our Power BI concert,
this will be the intro song for our stage presence. Yeah, when we go on the stage, we'll play some awkward songs as we get on stage.
That's incredible.
Awesome. Let's jump into our main. Actually, we have some news.
Yes.
Sorry, I forgot.
Yes, that was the other one. IDO SQL BI in the chat. Particle Man. Does everything a particle can.
I could get behind that one. That sounds very sciencey to me.
It is a great song. That's right. Oh, I was looking for that. Yes. Sorry.
Okay. That's what I'm saying.
It isn't going away. If somebody pops another one in the chat, I'll be like, yeah. I did have their CD. I know I did.
That's hilarious.
Anyway.
Awesome.
They're great songs.
I dig it. Good little intro there. So another big intro here is Tommy. We get great blog announcement from Rui Romano, and Rui's been doing this thing called the pbip or the PBIR formatting of our Power BI files. It's helping us break apart the files into more granular pieces. All right, Tommy, where are we at? What's this new update, and what is Rui blogging about? Because this thing looks, well, I know kind of where we're going, but I love this feature.
Yeah, so speaking of nerds, what if you loved Power BI but hated the user interface? That's basically what the PBIR file format is. And I know it's been out for a while, so I don't think Rui said anything was groundbreaking or that it's GA, but it was really just this deep dive of really how to actually use the PBIR format. It can be very intimidating when you first look at it because it can be so easy to break or modify your model. The only time you're really going to be using PBIR is in a Git type of environment. This is not something you're probably going to be doing with SharePoint. It actually now allows your model something more familiar to Git. So when you actually push things through. Now, what they've done with the PBIR format is how they've organized basically the entirety of your semantic model, both from the folder structure and also from the coding point of view. It really allows perfectly for source control and actually see where changes may have been. So Rui just goes through in the blog article, basically, here's the format, here's how to view it, and here's actually to do that source control with the PBIR format.
Yes, I'll say I agree with you, but I think there's a bit more in the article. So the PBIP format has slightly changed over the time that it's been out. So the format originally was one large JSON object for all things in the report. It would give you just a report object for everything in the report. It appears as though now the PBIR format, or this enhanced PBI format, they've been evolving how things are being built. So if you remember back in the day when we had Tabular Editor doing save model as folder or save model as files, you could take an entire file and it would take the file and deserialize the JSON object, the model.bim. It would serialize it into a series of smaller files. Here's a table definition. Here's all these different pieces of the model. So what it gives you the ability to do is it gives you the ability to check in, check out portions of a model. So for example, think about page 1. Page 1 contains visuals. Inside those visuals, you would have properties and objects and things that would describe those visuals. What this does is this gives you in the page, a single item by item object that you can go modify. So this will give you better control around, or detection, essentially. If you have a team of people, and this kind of fits very well with our conversation today, when you have a team of users building reports together, if someone adjusts page 1, you should be able to see changes occurring on page 1 when those changes are being checked in. So this is a way better format, and the fact that this is now being somewhat documented and there's now a structure to it and we have these different files, this is going to make it way easier for you to even merge changes as well. You could totally imagine 2 people working on 2 different pages and bringing those pages together and having a single merged report with 2 pages now being joined as one report, but 2 different people working on it. So this is a huge move that Microsoft's making here.
So I'm a little curious though, because he did mention Tyndall, which is not what this is. Because Tyndall is going to be the language basically for a semantic model, kind of more in a YAML format, but they're really focusing here on still kind of technical. It's JSON. Where does Tyndall fit in all of this?
Yeah, so Tyndall is interesting. So TMDL, Tabular Model Definition Language. This is all around a language that defines a data model. There are different things that need to be
specific to the data model.
Yeah, it's specific to data models only. And to be honest, the report side, it can be represented as JSON or YAML very easily. So YAML is yet not another markup language. It's more of a human readable syntax for how things are being built. The objects of the report are not required to have very creative conventions, I guess I would say. Like, so for example, like inside a model definition, you have comments that support a measure. So there was a way of representing that differently. So you have 3 slashes backwards to represent a comment for a measure. A measure has DAX. So there's like another language inside Tyndall that has, DAX and M. And so what the Tyndall language has to be able to do, it has to be able to obey, okay, this is a data source. Here's the M code, and it needs to be able to be formatted in a way that the Tyndall understands that, hey, this is a distinctly different language. You can write that inside Tyndall format and still have it be read by the desktop. So Tyndall is kind of slightly unique. It has it's like an enhancement of YAML. It's like a different language that's more enhanced, that has more features specifically for data model design. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Kurt Bueller's
No,
with us.
Uh-oh,
We're not
still a
talking about
title.
your article today. Maybe we are. Maybe we aren't. Anyway, what I like about this, obviously, this is a like the hardcore BI dev. Like, I want to replicate. I want to build in code or create repeatable objects in a faster way.
Yep.
And it opens up, I think, a lot of the visual control or pre-settings, to start a PBI, like start a report, which I love. So I think it's another big step in the direction of having true dev code experiences to help facilitate triage, and deploy code, which is, essentially the reports that we build in many cases for customers.
And to be clear, I mean, one of the big challenges we've always had has been when you go down to the visuals level in a report in the existing, even in the old pbip format, there was a whole bunch of string stored as text. That is no longer a case anymore. Now we have full JSON objects in all aspects of the storage of the data here. So this is really, really a big move here by Microsoft. There is no longer any string stored as text. I think, as I'm opening up a file here, most of the visuals and all the properties of the visual, if there's text in the visual, if there is properties in the visual, all the things that you would care about of the settings of the visual are now full searchable JSON. What this enables us to do is this. I think this format is going to enable a proliferation of tools that are going to be generating reports programmatically. We already use this format in our theme generator to do this. So this is a format that we've been taking advantage of for over a year now. I think it has been, Seth, that we've released the feature, but we now use this feature to help us produce reports that it can be just wireframed. You don't really need to open desktop to build a structure of a report. You can do all the styling separately, and that's what we're using. We're using all this stuff here separately.
Yeah. One thing to point out, there are so certainly check out the article. There are limitations to the PPIR right now.
Yep.
Like
great call
embedded, not there yet. They've called out specific things that they're going to be working on or deploying shortly.
Mm-hmm.
But they do state in there, once you go PBIR format, you can't revert, right? So whatever you're going to go for from the PBIP, save a version of that. And that's even more called out because as, a brand new thing gets out there, Nate Herring says, watch out. And he tried that, the PBIR format, and all his bookmarks got wiped out. So he's reverting until they fix that, or i.e. hopefully he has a backup. Good.
Right,
so
yeah.
Word of caution.
And I'm going to put in here as well. So Rui actually does call out, and even in Power BI Desktop. So when you switch over to a file and say, I'm going to save something as a PBIR format, there are some limitations that are changing, or there are limitations right now while it's in preview. These might get worked out and might change over time. But in the chat is the link for any of the limitations that are around the PBIR format, which is very important that you read through those and understand what's going on there. Like, for example, service limitations. A PBR format can't be included in Power BI apps. It can't be downloaded as a PBIX. It can't be exported to a PBI or PowerPoint, PPTX, or PDF.
PDF, yeah.
Can't be included in subscriptions. So these are like feature gaps that there's a lot of structural changes. It looks like it's happening on this file format that's impacting the PowerBI.com service. And I'm guessing they're going to continue closing these gaps as they use this new format for everything moving forward. So I'm excited about the new format. It is in preview, so be very aware. Using it will have some limitations. But that being said, it's going to be very useful, I think, in the future here. So this is really, really helpful. Great find, Tommy, on that article. Glad you caught that when it came out.
The discussion really builds well into our Tuesday conversation too, which is hilarious.
That was a hot take that came out early this morning.
Yeah, it's the 13th. It came out. It literally came out this morning with the news. So Rui posted it, and we caught it right away.
Yay! You heard it here first on the Explicit Measures podcast.
Well, yes, true. All right, let's jump into our main topic today. So, main topic today is an article written by Kurt, which Kurt, thank you very much for jumping in the chat as well. So Kurt is with us today. So hopefully we'll get some good chat here as well from Kurt. Additionally, we're going to go through an article from Data Goblins, and I'll put this one here as well. And it talks primarily around what is a fabric expert? How do we define a fabric expert? I think we've touched on this a little bit in some of our podcasts and given some kind of recommendations or pieces around this. I feel like this has been a hot topic for us recently, but I think this article is very timely at this point.
So before we jump
ahead.
into anything and how deeply you guys read the article, Mike, Tommy, are you guys fabric experts?
I'm wearing a fabricator shirt, so I feel like I'm pretty.
He's pretty well into it.
Yeah, so I'm wearing. I'm a genuine fabricator, is what my shirt says.
Okay. So it's maybe an
underhanded way of saying maybe I'm not.
Okay.
I feel like I'm going to slum. There are some aspects of this article I'm going to disagree with. I'm going to let you know right now. There's some challenges here. I'm thinking is here.
Okay.
There is some strong language used, not bad language, strong language used in the article that I think should be a slightly bit softer. Many of the points here I 100% agree with, and so there's a lot of things I align with. So would I call myself a fabric expert? I'm gonna have to gauge this. It's like a spectrum. It's like a scale, right? It's know nothing about fabric, know everything about fabric, right? Where do I fit on that scale? So I would say I would push myself farther down the. I know a lot of things about fabric, so maybe you could qualify me as an expert in fabric. Do I know every single thing in fabric? Probably not every single thing. If you push me towards the KQL databases and the real-time streaming stuff, that stuff's kind of new. Other people have been doing that, but that's kind of its own industry. There's kind of an own subject matter area around that specific topic that other people have been involved with. Like, have I done things with event hubs? Yes, I have. That's in Azure. So do I have some exposure to it? Yes, I do. But have I done 20, 30 projects in just streaming analytics stuff? No, I have not. So that would be one of the areas where I'd say I'm less strength around that one. But have I done projects with streaming things? Yes, I have. We've done data from source to reports in under 2 minutes. Like, we had a requirement, we did it. So I have some experience there as well.
I think that's your answer is a good segue into the article, and I think it is kind of where, on a high level, I agree with you in some of that. So, where do we want to start?
Well, I'm going to start with the very first quote that he puts on here. One person can't learn or do everything.
Fact.
So I agree with this, but I do think there are people out there that are actually studying fabric. And I do think there are people out there that are going to try to educate or at least have some experience or knowledge around all the aspects of fabric. So this is maybe one of my talking points there.
So I agree. And I think context matters, right? Holistically, if I'm looking at the article, I do definitely feel that there's some more oomph behind this one than some of the others. If I'm a business looking at individuals that are like Power BI people, and then the business has an expectation all of a sudden because they're reading that all of these tools in this whole ecosystem are right next to each other, and it's so simple to do what you even described right now, is I can do this in 2 minutes. That doesn't mean that person can, right? And I think part of this article is going to be around, are there technical people like you, Mike? Are there technical people like Alex Powers that can walk into organizations and they can take something that took 3 weeks or 3 months and we can say, this now takes 5 minutes in Fabric, watch me. And you can do that.
Hold my beer.
But you're an exception to the norm. Does that mean other people can't spend the years it took you to get to the point that you are, to understand this whole ecosystem and rapidly develop these solutions across the platform? Like, no, it took you a long time because you understood these services before they were even combined.
Correct.
And I think that's the overriding line in here, where you're not normal. You're a special unicorn, and we collectively,
thanks, Seth.
we collectively have had experiences in big data systems, in Power BI, in Azure Data Factory, in, oh my goodness, all of the services that got combined together in Fabric. But if you're just that Excel user, Mike, before you started consulting 10 years ago or whatever, and you're a Power BI person, and now you have access to Fabric, and your previous employer looks at you and goes, well, we no longer need all of these other people because all these services are together. Hey, Mike, you're the person. Do you know you know Fabric? Is that a reasonable expectation from an organization?
So I like your dive into the topic here, because I think this is exactly where I'm kind of going with things here a little bit. I really do agree. I agree with this a lot, Seth, in this statement. I like where you're going with this one as well. So I think I am not a normal person, because I've tried to be very intentional. I think, Tommy, you too as well, right? We have tried, and Seth, for most degree here, you've tried to, like, as an MVP, a Microsoft MVP, you study what the tool does, so you can be, like, it interests you. It's exciting to you. You have, like, and I'd also argue too, we all have people that we know or team members that help us do everything in Power BI. I get a lot of calls from other MVPs or other experts in the industry that are saying, hey, Mike, you know how to do embedded. I got some questions for you. They know that I know how to do embedded really well because I have done a lot of work with it. But do I expect every business user who's coming from Excel to know how to do Power BI embedded? No, I do not. And I think that's, to your point, Seth, is like, what's the context of the article? I think this article, and if you take this article with the context of, I'm in a business and I'm pushing existing Power BI individuals and giving them more Fabric, the expectations, not taking a DP600 will make you an expert. It will not take you from, zero knowledge of Fabric to 100% and now you're capable. I don't think there's a single test out there that would give you that. But to your point, Seth, Tommy and we've all been spending time studying the tool. And this is part of where I think I disagree with the article a little bit. There's a lot of strong language around, I think there's a couple phrases in here that just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And it just felt a little bit too stark to me. I want to give people the ability to, like, learn. And I feel like I want to give people a bit of the benefit of the doubt. And the fact that there's a couple sections in here where it says, there's this point down here. There's no such thing as a Fabric expert. I would kind of disagree with that statement. I think there are experts in Fabric.
I asked the question to you in the beginning.
Yeah, it's a question at the beginning. Is there no such thing as a Fabric expert? I would agree, most part, probably no in every single thing. But I think it's also important that experts that do show up kind of quantify where they're at. And also, in my team, there's a team of people behind me who are also consultants that also know various aspects of Fabric as well. So if I don't know, I have someone on my team who's done or dealt with some things as well that are very relevant, and I have knowledge I can pull on to get the answers that I need to get to answer these questions. And this is where I kind of got a little bit more hesitation in the article, right? If someone is claiming to be a Fabric expert, there are two things that are true. They are intentionally lying or misleading you, and they are ignorant on how big Fabric is and the differences and skills needed to manage it. And I would agree. I don't agree with that statement a little bit. I think internally looking, maybe. But I think there are people out there that are going to study this, and I think that's a naive statement, because I do think people are going to go out there and figure out how to use every part of Fabric and understand that it's valuable to them.
I need to stop you right there, because this goes back to a point that I've been saying all along. If you took out Fabric from the entire game, Mike, our careers have been built on Power BI, which has now just become not necessarily a cog in the machine, but it has definitely gone down a notch to like a subfolder. Before, when it was in the entire app, basically the entire application, and we could survive both in a career or as a consultant just doing Power BI for organizations, building the reports, managing the data. And how much do you need to know just due to that? And what Seth was talking about, was how many people do you know who are actually going to consume Power BI like we did? It's not a lot of people, and you've literally just multiplied that by 6, so to speak, with each of the other products now in Fabric. Power BI is still Power BI. Like, Power BI hasn't like take any features away from the Power BI's
agree.
application. Granted, there's different workflows, but I digress. And how much time have you spent? It's my waking hours since 2015. Since I was some 20-year-old schmuck, has been learning about Power BI, and I could always get more information, and I could always find a new blog, and I could always learn something. I could be a lot better at paginated reports still. There's still a few DAX things. I know what you're saying, Mike, about like, I also know, like, I have a great network, but you are now taking something like Power BI, which has consumed our waking days, and now open it up to other careers and other worlds that people just, that's all they did too. Without the need for Power BI, without the need for a data engineer, if you're a data scientist. So just from a time point of view, I get that I can lean on people. And like I said, I know there's a great network that we're already a part of, but I'm more worried about organizations just saying, yes, someone can get away with doing Fabric, just like they've been doing with Power BI. And I think that same stereotype, so to speak, is, I think, going to hold true a little.
I think that the learning curve for Power BI is much lower, right? And there's a lot of value you can get out of it as a non-technical person. I think this does highlight that Fabric introduces lots of technical services that are all slammed together, and it's being presented that all of a sudden this is simple and this is easy, or there are better paths. And to some degree, that is true. It's a true statement, but it oversimplifies, I think, the complexity of what's happening within Fabric here. Just because you slammed all this together doesn't mean that it automatically simplifies the learning path for individuals, right? The capability of Fabric does not mean that you can automatically implement effectively, right? There are no Fabric experts as it relates to every single one of these technical services across the board. It would take years, right? Like, Mike, would you say that from each of these technical services, you understand them all to the level that you do Power BI, or to the level that you know lakes, or,
Yep.
Of course not.
No,
right?
the answer is no.
From
and
that
new things are coming out all the time.
Perspective,
yeah,
I 100% agree with this article, but it's not like that's. There's also mixed tones across the board from being 100% technical expert in all of these things and saying that you can't get value. And I don't agree with that, because can you be a technical expert in all these? No, you're not. You can't be. At least nobody right now is a Fabric expert. There are none from that level to say, I know that the intricacies of every single one of these things and all these services and how they play. But I think that's significantly different than somebody like you who is instantly engaged in the platform and understands how to build the new solutions within it. Because what it's supposed to be doing, and what it is proving out, is that previous implementations took a long time to implement because these were different services. Does that mean that, like, you understood intimately all the details of how to put these services together? No, you didn't have to. You were building a data pipeline. You were connecting to a source. You were transforming it. You were loading it. You were delivering value to the business. Fabric is simplifying that ecosystem. So from that perspective, is it simple in quotes? Yeah, kinda, right? You can do it faster if you know what you're doing, i.e., you have individuals who are experts in the platform. They understand how to connect to data and move it through this platform, and you can do that much faster. So that's where I agree and I disagree with that statement, because even in there, the one that kind of tweaked me a little bit was what I'm pointing out is you can't expect people to be experts. But in the paragraph, there are two examples of how you can leverage. If you are a Power BI person, you could leverage semantic link, or you could do these things to make the business solution better. And that is what Fabric brings. Are there expectations you can have with people to say, hey, learn these new things in this ecosystem that are now available, that you don't have to do anything like outside of like connecting to a new service or do all these really technical things? They're available to you. And is it quote unquote simple to implement? Well, it is compared to what it used to be.
Yeah.
Right. So there is value there. And
Yes.
you can have some expectations because it's there. But I do think there are some overriding points I'll make later, but around just the assumptions of the business. But there's this back and forth, I think, of what is the value we're providing in Fabric. It relates to how quickly we can connect, transform, load, and make data useful, versus this being an uber technical conversation around how much we understand of all of these different components, and can you actually call yourself an expert in all of them?
And go ahead, Tommy.
I think this is probably a perfect time too, to really also really define expert, right? Because I think our tendencies are, I think, different from what a normal person would think an expert is. The way we're an expert in Power BI is not just that I'm really good at it and I can find the answer. Odds are, any question that may come up with a situation like, oh, this admin thing, like where do I go, or like how do we set that up? Oh, I can do it from the admin all the way to the technical, all the way to the design. And if I either know where it is in the interface or I know where to look. It's basically like we've been dating Power BI. I know the ins and outs. I know what makes it laugh. I know what makes it laugh. All the little intricacies of Power BI we are intimately aware of. I think it's going to be very tempting to feel the same way with Fabric because we're taking a lot of time. But again, you're dealing with now another product or tooling that has all these other gotchas that we have no idea or even aware of that. We know basically anytime how to get an error in Power BI, what that error means, and then how to fix it. All the errors, both in the service if something's not working or something on our desktop, we can handle it. But I mean, when we've been running Jupyter notebooks, like, oh, that was weird. Okay, so just what's that date thing? Or it's like there's this whole other ecosystems with their own other bugs that have lived on forever, and that you may do the product right a few times, but what really I think separates someone as being a true expert, and I think where Kurt's coming from is that I may be able to find the answer for you in anything with Fabric, and knows how much time been spending from reading and just going through everything. But there's always going to be situations that it's one of those like unknown knowns, unless you were a data scientist for the last 5 years or you were in data engineering and that's all you did for the last 5 years, that you may be able to set it up. You may have the book knowledge, but you don't know what can come up or show up in that system. And I think that's the difference here when we're talking about expert. And that's why we spent 9 years only doing Power BI, and it's been great. And people need that one. And it's been paying the bills just to do one thing, learn all the
So now that we've declared that there can be experts in some cases, or
well, I think that's
I think there is a delineation. I do think
yes.
What about the major point here, which is I think the industry, and this is one of them. There's a second. This industry push and trend and the marketing and all of everything to oversimplify this and then push for learning the DP600, right? It's pushing for individuals to master this giant platform called Fabric. And I do think if you take yourselves out, like special unicorns and people who a small subset of individuals, right? There is complexity, and I do agree with him that it is worrisome to some degree that we're oversimplifying the current state of data, right? We're bringing all of these services together. These were entire platforms that did stuff, and they're now coming together. And just because they're accessible doesn't mean that it's easy to consume. And I think it's really disingenuous, even when Mike, to your example, or in our last podcast, Alex's example, where folks present something like, we had a project that should have taken 3 months and we did it in 2 days. But who did it? It was the person who understood it all. Like, who understood not just the technical, and I think he makes this point, it's the data ecosystem. What are all the things that have to happen on an enterprise level? It's people with that experience that are able to leverage the platform to its optimal point. But it's fooling the Power BI person into believing that they can just automatically do that. And they can't. Right? You would have, like, if you're brand new to the Fabric platform, Mike, like, and there's a 3-month project and you're a Power BI person, and there's an expectation that now you're doing the full ETL, the data modeling build, the whole 9 yards. Is that going to take you 2 days for that person? No, they have to learn the platform. They have to learn all the things that they're supposed to be doing. They've got to figure out, am I using the lakehouse? Am I using, warehouse? Am I using whatever? And I think that's the point here, is like, business, like, Microsoft is pushing that this is now simple and it's easy, and it is for one audience, but that's a small audience, the audience of engineers, the developers, the people who have been doing this for a very long time. It's a fantastic solution. It is not for the Power BI folks. And I think that's where you get into this really rapid, like, whiplash of reaction, because Microsoft has a tool that is Power BI. And there are certain aspects of Power BI that they started building a lot of these engineering things to solve, right? Mm-hmm. And now we want to backtrack and, like, hey, like, leverage bigger, better systems. Okay. Just as long as it took them to figure out how to use these new capabilities for Power BI, it's going to take them a long time again to refactor onto Fabric. It just because it's there doesn't mean that people are instantly going to know how to use it. And I think that is the point here, is you can't have an expectation, or businesses can't, that people pivot this fast in their learnings or figure things out, because the vast majority, I would argue, of Power BI people, or people leveraging Power BI, are because they understand their data. And they finally had a visual interface, and they had something that taught them how to change and do some transformations and automate some of the things that they were doing in Excel. And it works because they know the data. To take them and throw them into the Fabric realms and the ecosystems, I do think it, like, fits in line that it's not possible. It's not possible to implement Fabric and expect that one person to do it. I do think it takes a team-ish, but I think this falls into roles. There are roles within an organization, and there may be people that can fill multiple roles, right? You may have an integration engineer that is a data engineer that understands how to use ADF and how to use SQL Warehouse. Cool. That's their role in a project. But that doesn't mean the Power BI person can do that, right? Like, you need multiple people to go attack this. And it is a much better way, I think, for the communication within an organization to live. And I do think there's a conflict with some of the messaging that is coming out in that regard.
So I'm going to point out a couple of things here. I like your points there very much, Seth. And Kurt's actually putting some really good comments here as well. So thank you, Kurt, for being gracious with us as we talk about your article. I know we're being a bit, picky about some of the things here. And I think, Seth, you're doing a great job summarizing where we are coming from in this. I'm going to take a step back just a moment and just I'm thinking at a high level here just for a bit, as I'm just practically thinking through, like, what's going on with Power BI. And this is just maybe Power BI specific, right? So let's just focus on Power BI. Have you heard of the book, or there's a phrase or something that is coming to my mind when we're talking through this one? There's the 10,000 hours.
Malcolm Gladwell?
Yes, yeah. 10,000 hours, right? And there's another book out there. I'm not sure where it comes from, but the phrase that comes to mind is, you are what you practice, right? So when you're a kid, your parents sit you down at the piano and you spend time on the piano, and you're just trying to put, a couple minutes on the piano every day, a little bit. And another book that I've been reading right now is Atomic Habits, which is incredible, by the way. So if you haven't read the Atomic Habits book, very, very impactful for my career, my personal life, all the things. So highly would recommend Atomic Habits as a read as well. But that being said, if I just even let's say Power BI came out and you said I'm 100% on board. I'm going to spend every waking hour of my work time working on Power BI. When it came out, 2015. Let's just give you the benefit of the doubt. The full year 2015 came out. The Power BI came out on January 1, and then as an assumption, you can assume in a year you can roughly work. If you took no vacations, again, this is a very broad assumption. If you took no vacations, you could work 2,040 hours a year. That's usually the number people use to kind of say, if you worked 40 hours a week for 52 weeks a year, that's your number. If you just took that number and said, okay, I'm going to start day one from Power BI and learn until I hit 10,000 hours, you would not have learned Power BI until 2019. So came out in 2015, you would need 4 years to become an expert in something. Okay. So using that same logic, right? Tommy and Seth and I could have become experts in 2019. Likely we didn't, right? When the tool came out, we didn't immediately transition our careers into like only thinking about Power BI moving forward. We spent a little bit of time. So it probably took us longer than 4 years to actually absorb and really transition our careers to only think about Fabric or Power BI all the time. The same thing is true in Fabric. So Fabric came out in late 2013. So at most, again, even benefit of the doubt here, right? You would need a minimum. We've only got around the potential for around 2,000 hours in Fabric at this point.
You said 2013, 2023.
Sorry, you're right. Correct me if I'm wrong. 2023.
You were on a long beta, my friend.
Ooh, that was a big beta there. Yeah. So 2023. So less than a year we've had time, and I think this is where, if I'm thinking back to Kurt's article here, like this is really important because the tool itself has only been recently produced. Yes, there are other places in Azure that are very similar and have very transition concepts like the lakehouse, the Delta tables. Like those concepts have been around for a while, and I've been building those things for 5, 6, 7 years now. So I feel like from that perspective, I can take other knowledge. But to your point, Seth and Tommy here, I think what you're making the point is it's going to be more and more important inside Fabric to talk about what are the different roles and personas that are going to need to be using these things inside Fabric. And I think this is, transitioning someone from a DBA into using notebooks. Right? You used to write SQL store procedures, and now you're going to write notebooks in T-SQL or Spark SQL. I think it's a good transition to make. But you're able to pull on years and years of knowledge of that person doing DBA level exercises in like staging tables and moving data through and data pipelines. That's a data engineering role. So there's a lot of these other roles that already exist that knowledge is not going to be in that default Power BI developer. And I think that's maybe more of where Kurt is going in this article, saying, look, you have Power BI people, they've been doing Power BI, they're experts there, and now we're asking them to do all these extra things or all these other workloads. And I think it's really important for us to center around the idea of like, you are correct. There's not one person who can do it all. They're not going to be an expert at everything. Microsoft is going to continually make it easy for these different personas to play together. And this is what I think we've been saying from the beginning here. This is a huge opportunity for the business user, people who like Power BI and want to educate and learn more in these other data engineering type tools. You can totally do it. It's something we can definitely have happen. So I really do feel firmly strong about this. Like we need to be talking in the latter part of Kurt's article, which I think is really well done. At the very bottom, he starts talking about there's a couple questions that are appearing at the end. And I felt like that was so relevant. Let me pull up the article again here real quick on my screen. He starts talking about what is the role that we're trying to do? What is the business user experience we're trying to get through to do this? Like there's very specific things in here that I think there's just so relevant. And I really like those questions at the end of the article. That's where we should focus our attention, our time on. What is the business question? What are we trying to accomplish? Let's focus on those things and then engage experts in the areas that we need to figure out what parts of Fabric can we do. So those are the.
So you agree with those aspects? I mean, of all the things, the only
most certainly.
I don't think we're disagreeing with the first point. Like Kurt at the very top, threefold. The purpose of the article is to call out it's unrealistic to expect people to learn Fabric, and it's impossible to be a Fabric expert, right?
Yeah.
So we split hairs there. Second, consequences of the language of this language in marketing, and I think we do agree with that. Not only in just like the oversimplification of it, But to this third point, to suggest content about Fabric would be more helpful to address personas, right? You're talking about massive parts of a data ecosystem and bringing these groups together, right? And those are big chunks of like who spends time doing what thing. And to oversimplify and everything is Fabric dilutes where somebody can go learn something. You know what I'm saying? So
Yes.
I think there is a stream that is Fabric, and that is, let me show you a specific walkthrough of something. I think he calls out Mark Lillefeld or Lillefeld.
Yeah.
In like having a specific example of I'm gonna show you guys how you go connect to data, get it into the SQL warehouse, and then into the semantic model and Power BI report. Like here's a very thin example of a tutorial you can do to leverage all of the aspects of Fabric, but it's very specific, right?
Mhm.
And it lets them navigate the whole ecosystem versus somebody who is a Power BI expert. Where do they start? Right? Like go to the Fabric blog. The Fabric blog now contains updates for every part
Everything.
of that
Mhm.
ecosystem.
Yeah.
So just because you threw it together in Fabric doesn't mean that there's not data integration. They even call it out. It's Data Factory, it's SQL Warehouse, it's the, Synapse warehouse. All of this stuff is combined, but it's difficult to digest the fire hose because it's all Fabric. It's all this part of this same ecosystem. And I think it is challenging, especially Mike. I think you made this in a previous podcast, a comment. Like the DP600 is just the generalized, like,
Yeah.
hey, like this
Yeah.
is Fabric. Like, and if you compare that to
Yes.
some of the other tests, like that I've taken, Power BI, SQL, like it's very specific. Like
Yes.
you get into deep technical questions about the aspects of how this tool works and what are the different things you can use with it and blah, blah, blah. But to have a test that covers that whole ecosystem, it is general by nature. It's going to be a high level, kind of here's how you go do something. So
Yeah, I agree.
I do think there are challenges in there.
I think this is an incredible article, and again really want to. I got the article up in front of me here. One thing I read through these final questions here: who's this content for? Which roles or which tasks would benefit from this project that we're doing? Who is this not for? So defining what things we're not trying to do, I think, is also just as important. What existing problems does this solve? Does this create new business value or not? Is this something that should be on the enterprise developer? Is this a citizen developer? Should this be for a self-service user? Or is there some other persona that we're using in our organization that this is for? Data engineer, data scientist? I don't know. I like these questions, and where my mind goes with this is there anything that currently helps users or organizations to evaluate these questions based on what's currently in Fabric and their current team skill set? And I would argue the answer is now, no. There's nothing out there today that helps you identify, okay, let's look at the lens of all the things that Fabric can do. We have streaming, we have lake houses, we have pipelines, all these great things, right? There's a lot of things in there, and I think it's challenging to look at that and say, as a business coming into this, how do I know even the right questions to ask? Because I haven't had runtime or experience. This is my same argument that I use for leaders hiring Power BI developers. Leaders come into organizations and say, we're ready to hire a Power BI developer. What skills should they have? And the leader doesn't know because they haven't had runtime with Power BI yet. They don't know yet. So to me, there's some more education from Microsoft's perspective. Like, I think there needs to be more coming from the Microsoft documentation that supports more of these different questions, and I think has a better emphasis or role. What I've seen so far is I've seen very strong messaging around the business analyst, the data engineer, and the data scientist. Those are the three kind of main roles that I see happening in Fabric. I think there's actually many more roles that are occurring inside Fabric. I think it's the report consumer. I think it's a report developer, a data modeler, data engineering, data scientist. So I think breaking these roles a bit more specifically apart and describing specifically those areas, I think really helps. And this is where, Seth, we started with the skills matrix. We've talked about this a lot on Power BI Tips. There is specific skills. And then the idea here is you can have domain experts come into data engineering, and they can speak to what should you know to become a data engineer. That's the level of bar that we need to be educating our leadership about, so we know when to hire those kind of people into those roles. What is a data scientist doing? What's the expectation of what they should be working on in the lens of like Fabric? Let's define the skills that are required there, and then let's talk about here's specific training paths that go deep into the weeds, learn.microsoft.com, or training specific things that we focus on that persona. I like that kind of mentality because now we can really dial in that skill set for that person, and now you can tick the box. And Tommy, you and I were just talking about this offline the other day. Tommy's like, well, how do we know when we have a Power BI professional or expert in a business? And I said, you have to have something to measure them against. And so I've come up with this thing called the skills matrix. I took our original skills matrix on Power BI tips. I've enhanced it for multiple different roles. And I've written out, okay, you're a report consumer level 100 if you know these skills. You're a report builder 200 if you know these skills. If you're a 300, you know these skills. So it's like this stacking skills effect that experts can come in, people who've spent the 10,000 hours on these areas and can define what this means. I think for now, when we're talking about like pipelines and all these other things, you're going to have to borrow experts from other parts of Fabric or other parts of Azure that actually had these skills in them and utilize them to define what is an expert until there's actually experts in Fabric.
I think the really large challenge with all that is, and it's great you're doing that, Mike, is just like Power BI and the frustrations that we've shared many times about people calling themselves experts and knowing nothing about the totality of the tool. This is flooding the market with Fabric experts because they've passed the DP600.
Yes.
Right. Like, and this level of expert, I think, does warrant a bit of frustration, which is voiced in this article. And technically I agree with. Now, on a macro level, is this all happening and where we're at? Or like switching gears here a little bit. On a higher level, is this all happening because there's a direction we don't see yet or understand, and this is just the current state of the platform, right? Like, likely, are we on the road and we just can't see around the bend? And to some degree, I think that's probably valid. We don't see the full roadmap, and could part of that roadmap be in the future? We have a platform where AI is going to simplify this for an end user in this ecosystem. And I honestly think, I think the answer could be yes. Is there a ways before we go there? I don't know. Like, I'm continually shocked at how fast advancements are made. Yeah. But if I look at like what's happening with Fabric and everything, like that's an ecosystem where that could plug in and work. I'm gonna make my last like gripe point and frustration point that I agree, and it was in a side chat where I think he had a goblin talking at another person.
Sure.
And this is the one that if Fabric is a problem in businesses having overset expectations of individuals, AI is that times 100, because largest PETA, the largest pain for, I think, data professionals right now is organizations that think they can just skip to the front of the line with having left their data ecosystems in a state of absolute disarray and or non-investment to just go straight to AI and it's going to solve all their problems. I think they're in for a rude awakening, because unless you have invested in data, in all of the things that allow your business to drive insights, and you know that because of those investment dollars, you are not going to be able to just plug AI in and have all of the things work. And I think that point is the one that drives me up a wall. Like, if I was going to write an article, it would probably be along the same lines as Kurt's vented frustration in terms of like AI, because like to leverage it and be able to use the capabilities from these tools, like they're already falling over. Like they're not working. You can use them in pointed solutions. Like it's an exact example of like even Copilot. Where is it effective? It's in code, right? Where is it? Where is it? How is it being implemented? Very specifically in each one of these individualized services. It's not the whole thing yet, right? And for people to think that Copilot as this giant thing, or I've got a version of ChatGPT and automatically I can ask anything I want about my organizational data. No, you can't. Not if you didn't invest anything in putting that data together or having these systems understand what that data means.
Yeah.
And I'm going to get off this because I could go for another hour on it, but he does outline that one, and that one, Kurt, I'm 100% with you on that one.
I like where you're going with that one as well too. So I do agree with you, Seth, there as well. I think this is an evolution, right? This is the challenge when technology makes things so joined together. We now have new problems to kind of work out and figure out together as a team. And I think these are good conversations to have. We are actually at time, so I do want to do kind of final thoughts here. So I think is that your final thought, Seth, or do you want to add some more final thoughts there?
It was. I was going to wrap on that.
Okay. So that's a great final point. Seth, Tommy, any final points from yourself as well?
I think the biggest thing outside of the individual trying to figure this out is really it's going to be that messaging to organizations. I think one, so you don't see even more burnout than there already is, but really then what is the investment in organizations going to need to make, and what is that relationship now with their data team, which has exponentially changed than just the Power BI team, and how much more integrated that is. How much is the messaging going to be, or how will it come across both from who we're going to need to hire and what kind of careers are going to come from this? And I think that's where I'm going with that.
Yeah, I like this article a lot. I think many Kurt's points in here are 100% spot on. I like a lot of these points. I would very much emphasize there are roles, there are skill sets that are being merged together here. And I think to look at Fabric and say there's one person to do it all, I think it's a naive perspective. I think you're going to have to find multiple experts to kind of really dial in on parts of Fabric. I like the idea of Fabric and the fact that it's very easy for other users to cross-pollinate or get skills from other teams, where I feel like, and this is probably up to the community more as well, there's just not enough education from the community to really define what the skills are required for all of these different roles. I do know there are multiple roles. Has the community officially defined all those roles and what skills are really required to get to that level? I'm not sure yet. There's no like governing board of this that would help people kind of really centralize around this one. But I do, for lack of better terms, I think this is a really great opportunity for you as a business user to get a lot of, you now have exposure potentially to all these really rich Microsoft tools. They're all coming together. It's going to be easier to use. It's going to be useful for your business to understand how this works. So it'll be interesting to see how this stuff continues to evolve. And it's changing fast. I like it. I like the changing fast. I like this continued learning experience, but I'm an expert in a lot of things. I still feel like I'm overwhelmed. There's a lot of things changing very quickly, and it's hard to keep up with all the things. If I'm doing that and I live and breathe Power BI every single day or Fabric every single day, I can't imagine other people having the same challenge as well. Okay. With that, thank you very much. This has been a great article discussion. Go check out the article. You have to go read it. It's definitely worth a read. Anyone who's listened to the podcast, make sure you go find it. It's Data Goblins it's their main article. The URL is in the description as well. So make sure you go hit that up and go find it. With that, we really appreciate your ears. We appreciate your time spending with us while we argue about things that may or may not have relevance to your life. So hopefully it does. But that being said, we really do appreciate if you like the conversation here, if you like learning something new from the podcast, we really do appreciate it. Please share it out either on social media, tell someone at work about it, talk to other people about the podcast, because that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to facilitate general discussion around all the things that are Fabric and how do we as organizations, leaders or users of the systems, really try to invest our time and what's finding value to us. Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
You can find us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to subscribe and leave a rating. Helps us out a ton. Do you have a question, an idea, or a topic that you want us to talk about in a future episode? Head over to powerbi.tips/podcast. Leave your name and a great question. And finally, join us live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 Central, and follow us on all Power BI Tips social media channels.
Awesome. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you next time.